evening, everybody, and welcome to Unite Students webinar series about study strategies for highly successful students. I will be shortly introducing Dr. Martin Sedgley, who you'll be able now to see on your screen next to the first slide, who will be taking us through the first webinar, which is part of our Spring Festival 2021. And this one is going to be about sharing his experiences on efficient academic reading. There will be further 3 other webinars which we are going to have in the next following 3 weeks. The next one is going to be on a high-grade academic writing, the next couple of them, and then the last one is going to be about how to gain further confidence in ensuring that you pass your exams in a correct way. Guys, for all of those who are attending, up on the top of your screen, on top right-hand corner, you will see 2 speech bubbles. One of them has a question mark. If you do have any questions, please write them in over here. Either myself or Martin will be able to pick them up and we'll read them out, and Martin will be able then to give you the answers that you're looking for. So without further ado, Martin, over to you.
Thank you very excuse me. Thank you very much, Tatiana. And hello everyone. Thanks for joining this evening. Delighted to have you with us. Tatiana's mentioned that I've worked in university setting for about 15 years now, guiding students in their academic skills development, and it's great to have the opportunity for the second series now of webinars with Unite, just to provide an additional resource for you, really, in as well as all the other ways that you're learning at university to develop your academic skills in line with your degree program. We've timed these really during this term after Easter. We're running the same sessions again, as you've just seen in the list, because we're very conscious that you're now almost certainly going to be working on various assignments that you've been given. Of course, this year has been very strange, with deadlines being pushed back because of the extraordinary circumstances you're all having to work under, and because of that, as much as anything else, really, we wanted to try and provide a bit of extra guidance for you that you may find useful when you're working on your assignments, especially to submit for your deadlines, which I guess are coming up either this month or sometime in May. So I know this is pretty imminent for you, and we are going to be running webinars on the same days next week and the week after on the writing aspects for those. But of course, all of that writing can only come from the reading that you've been doing, your academic research. So that's our reasons for starting with this topic, that you need to really obviously be able to read effectively in a way that's going to save you as much time. Is my main objective tonight, really, is just to give you some tips and ideas from myself, but also from graduates that have kindly given us the benefit of their advice and experience that we've recorded, and I've imported some videos and audio of their comments and tips and ideas about what will help you save some time in the next few weeks, especially at this stage, maybe where you're still having to do some research to keep putting further ideas into the assignment drafts that you're working on. And so to improve the quality of those assignments, and therefore the results that you get by the end of this academic year. So we want to be very pragmatic tonight and try and give you some, just practical advice about what's worked from the experience of lots of students that I've supported over the last few years, and some students that you'll hear from directly tonight as well. Okay, so my proposition really tonight to kick all of this off is that perhaps academic reading may be the greatest challenge of all that students face in their studies on any kind of degree program, whatever whatever program you're studying on, whatever kind of subjects and topics you're having to look at, they're all, you know, in the text you're having to read textbooks, journal articles, government reports, or, you know, what it's scientific reports, whatever it might be. It's really high level academic stuff, isn't it? You know, and their tutors are deliberately directing you to things that are going to challenge your thinking and really force you to have to work hard at understanding what those are getting at. And so that's really what I want to put out there straight away, is if you've been experiencing difficulties with managing the workload of the reading, and especially in understanding the kind of density and complexity of the text you're reading, then you're experiencing what most students do experience, especially in the earlier stages of their academic programs. So I'm going to move on to, first of all, give you the opportunity to listen to Lucy talking about one of the challenges she experienced. Lucy, like the other students that I bring into these webinars, as a recent graduate. So she graduated last year from a master's program with distinction, having already achieved a first class honours at bachelor's level. So very, very successful student, and the same as the other students I'll be asking you to listen to. But things weren't straightforward for her necessarily either in her studies.
So as I mentioned at the beginning, I did my undergraduate degree, I graduated with distinction. And then when I started my master's, I felt pretty confident that, you know, I graduated with a first class degree, I'll be fine. I still knew that it's going to be a challenge just because I changed my degree from like international business to politics. But I wasn't aware that the demand of like the reading they ask us to do at the master's level will be that different and that like higher. So when I came to the university, I had this core module which was about European institutions, and every week we were asked to read 5 journal articles, and even though 5 might sound as like a small number, these journal articles can be quite broad, and especially for someone who didn't have like political background, I found it very challenging to go through them and like read them and try to understand what they're talking about, because before I was really used to reading company reports, things like, I don't know, human resources, accounting and finance, and then I started reading about these like European institutions. I still have like kind of like basic idea how things work, but we basically had to actually come up with like complete some tasks, such as write a short paragraph, like to summarize what the journal article is about, or we had to have like a debate in the class with my classmates to truly understand the concept. But I really didn't know what I'm reading about. It took me a couple of weeks to catch up, but we will come to solutions later. So yeah, this is just.
Oh, yeah.
So
sorry, I lost the technology there for a moment, but yeah, so that was Lucy, who were obviously a very highly successful student, but still experiencing, interestingly, when she moved on to a master's, you know, having studied there for 3 years and with a year placement as well, I think 4 years on an undergraduate program. Obviously, I haven't had to do a lot of reading on that, and yet when she came to work on the masters and was asked to read 5 journal articles together for, you know, within a week, it was just too much, really. And I think 2 issues she identified there. So there's the volume of reading, and any journal article probably 8,000, 10,000 words each, and yet you've got to distill those somehow, you know, funnel the ideas out of those somehow down into just a few words, you know, short summaries, as she indicated. That's a really high level academic skill to be able to do that, especially when these texts are so complicated. And journal articles are written by academics for academics. They're not really written by academics for students. And yet, as students, you're directed into that you know, really highest level of academic writing in journal articles, you know, as I'm sure you're finding in most subjects, at least you might be studying, that tutors are really keen for you to do that, to go way beyond your textbooks, and look at this real dense kind of writing. So we'll hear later again from Lucy about how she addressed that and found a way, you know, to get beyond that kind of block, really, that barrier. Now, in that case, the tutor was giving guidance on what to read, but the other issue I've raised here for you to, you know, that you might well recognise is that often enough that they may just set a reading list with 15 or 20 texts on, and that's it. You know, you don't get much more guidance than that, at least on the face of it, through lectures and in the course handbook or something like that, whatever your tutors are referring you to. There's a reading list including there without much prioritisation about which particular texts are more important than others, possibly with the exception of a single core textbook, which most tutors adopt as their sort of main book for students, you know, the one that you're encouraged you really have to buy kind of thing. But beyond that, definitely for high grades in assignments, tutors on any programme will be saying, oh, I want you to go way beyond even the reading list I'm setting you. So I think this is not helpful, really, for students. I think students need some direction and guidance about what to read and how to read it, and that's really what we're starting to get into tonight here. So I think then, without that kind of guidance, without academics explaining to students actually how they want you to go about reading, it's a bit of a labyrinth, really. And I think in amongst that there are various myths that students can bring with them into that labyrinth, very often from their past experience of reading either at school or actually just reading for pleasure. And, you know, on of course the internet and social media browsing and that sort of thing is very, you know, short bullet point type, you know, text, quick sound bites as they call them. And then you come to this academic reading, and I think students often assume that in this kind of context you have to read all the texts on that reading list, and each of those texts you have to read from cover to cover, and you've got to understand every word of those texts. I want to really explode those myths tonight, all of them, all three of those. And so first of all, I'm just going to ask you to listen briefly to another student, again, very high performing student, Farah, similar to Lucy, first class honours at undergraduate level, moved on to a master's at another university and achieved a distinction, but still, as you'll hear, experiencing some difficulties with her reading. Because you can't, no one student can possibly try and understand everything that in the number of texts that seem to be on the reading list and that they find from their own research, that you have to be selective somehow, don't you?
Yeah, you have to be selective, and it's not like the textbooks are kind of like the leisure reading that you would normally see in books, so it's not as entertaining as you would in terms of a book that you're reading that would be of interest to you, but it's kind of being smart and
Hi, Martin. It looks like the sound has gone muted. 1 second, I'm trying to just resolve it. Is there anything else that you can click on your slides? Apologies for this, please. Martin, can you check underneath your picture down at the bottom if you can see there should be a microphone sound, and you can see if you can try to unmute? There we go. We are back on.
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies for this. Yep.
Sorry, Tatiana. I don't know how that happened. I wasn't aware that I'd done that. I'll just.
You are back to normal. Yeah. So if you want to just play your slides back from the slide where we stopped. I think the last bit was Farah that we had. So if you start from this slide. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
We also had a question from a student, and I think this is going to refer to something that you've mentioned earlier. Which was, should we stick to the recommendations from the core textbook? So the textbook that you've mentioned that most of the academic tutors will have. So should we stick to the recommendations from the core textbook usually found at the end of each chapter? So when we are talking about specific which academic journals or anything else that we need to read as students?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the short answer to that is yes, I think in general, that if I've understood, I think what the student is asking is that they're given a reading list and should they stick primarily to the journal articles and text that the tutor has recommended. I think that's what it sounds like they mean, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that broadly speaking, that is, you've got to follow as much as you can what the tutor is saying that they're looking for. My point about saying that you have to read everything on the reading list as being a myth is just that I want students to understand that they don't have to follow that slavishly, but that there will be other ways of identifying a range of texts, not just purely through the reading list. So I think some of those, you need a certain amount, a reasonable proportion of the text from any reading list. But there are also other ways which we're going to move on to in some of the subsequent slides tonight that suggest how you might be able to access different kinds of sources, in some cases beyond what's on the reading list, not necessarily therefore mean more texts than are in total on the reading list. But I think those lists are a guide really from the tutors, and they're not expecting every student to read every single text and only those texts. It's not as categorical as that, really,
It's
so that was, yeah.
One of the things that potentially is also a piece of advice from myself is, as you know, I'm currently doing my MBA studies, and I have just embarked on writing my final management project. But as I was going through the modules, one of the things, and we did have the core textbooks, as you've mentioned, and at the end of each module, yes, you do, there is usually a bibliography of specific books that have been referred to within that module, and those are usually good ones to delve deeper, especially, as I say, if your tutor has picked that specific textbook, a core textbook, he picked it for a reason, so stick with that, and then at the end of those books you're usually going to find something else that you want to potentially explore a little bit into more detail. So I hope that again helps.
Yeah. That's one of the main points, Tatiana. Thanks. That it'll be good for students to think about taking away from this, is that you can develop what's called, and I recommend this strongly, but what's called an inductive research trail. And what's meant by that really is you start with one text which is right at the heart of the topic that you're looking at, and often enough that could well be the core textbook in a particular chapter within that textbook, and that will then have citations in it to other sources which have informed that material that you've already discovered is really important for your assignment. So you can follow, as Tatiana's saying, those citations to the references at the end of that text and look at some of those references as well, because they're really bang on the subject you're looking for. That's not the full picture, but that's an important part of it. So that could well lead you to something that the tutor hasn't included on the reading list, but is actually just as important, just as valuable as other texts that they've produced. So the reading list is only a guide really, and not a comprehensive, exhaustive document. Okay, so have you got the slides up okay, Tatiana? Aren't they showing? Are they, with what I've done?
Yeah, that's all showing. Yeah, if you want to put it in a presentation mode, because we can see the side slides as well on a side.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right, let's do that then. Yes, so let's go from the current slide. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so with focus on your assignment writing or research for your assignment writing in this webinar that we're running tonight, I'm suggesting that you could follow something I've developed in consultation with all the students I've worked with over the years, a model of a series of steps that you can take to try and achieve this process that Farah's just described of being selective in what you read. And this is the key. If you take one word away from tonight, more importantly than anything else, I would say that might be it. You've got to be quite ruthless, and in a way it'll feel to you like you're kind of taking a risk, that you're dismissing lots of texts for a start. I'm going to be suggesting that you might, when you look at them first, you'll think this journal article, it sounds like it might have something, possibly could be related to what I'm looking for. With that amount of doubt in your mind, I would say throw it away, get rid of it. You've got to be really let's say ruthless with that, because the reason I can say this quite confidently, I know you might think it's easy for me to say when it's you that's having to write research and write the assignment, but my reasons for saying that are that you'll never be short of possible sources to research. The problem is you've actually got far too many of them for you to potentially be able to distill these ideas down within the time you have available. So as Farah said, effective reading is actually really about time management, and this is a process that we're looking at here in these 5 stages. I'm going to show you a slide on each stage in the next section, which tells you a bit more about what I mean by each of these steps. This is discussed in quite a lot more detail in one of the study guides that I've now published through the website, ELS International website. So this will introduce you to these ideas tonight, and then if you want to have a look at that reading guide, there's another study guide on the website as well on academic writing, which sort of complements the webinars we're running in the next couple of weeks as well. So feel free to go and have a look at the website. Worth one look at least to kind of get a bit better understanding of what we're just touching on tonight, really. Let's first of all, before I move into those 5 slides, one for each stage, let's listen again to Lucy, kind of coming back on this idea of, so how did she try and meet this problem of having far too much reading, 5 journal articles, if you remember, she'd said. So I'll just want to start this a little bit further on and take.
So I would say that my biggest learning was to ask for help. And of course, in Bradford, I was lucky to have ELS. So if you have something similar at your university, I would definitely encourage you to seek help from them. But there are also other ways, like maybe you have your classmates, you can ask them, do you understand? Can you help me understand what I'm reading about? Or you might ask your personal tutor or any other lecturer, even sometimes the person who's actually delivering the module might not be the person who can actually help you. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't, but just be prepared to ask for help and don't rely on one source. So what I personally did, and I was lucky that it worked for me, that I went to my lecturer, who was my personal tutor at the same time, and after like 2 or 3 weeks, I just wasn't following the module. I booked his office hours, and I came in and I told him, like, look, I know we are supposed to read these 5 journal articles, but I honestly don't know what I'm reading about. I'm really trying hard to understand them, but I just don't follow. So what he did, he just told me, look, it's fine, put them away, put them on the side. If you don't understand, he gave me, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 titles of core textbooks, not journal articles, core textbooks, and told me, look, these textbooks are about theory, try to understand different theories and the concept and everything. If you understand these, go back to journal articles and I'm sure it'll be fine. If you don't understand, just come back to me. And I went to those textbooks. Of course, not all of them worked for me. I think actually at the end I used only 2. I went through them, then went back to journal articles, and I finally understood what they are about. And then, of course, I also started asking my fellow classmates as well. Like, like when I mentioned we had these debates in the class before the tutorial, we just had a chat and chit chat about like what the journal articles are about. Is everyone like following the exercises, or if not, can you help me? So really just ask for help at like different sides, don't rely on one source. So you obviously.
Yeah, so I think I want to emphasise there what Lucy's saying is that, over the next slides, we'll have a pause for questions, so Tatiana can let me know, and I'd welcome, really encourage you to put any questions in that are occurring to you as I've been speaking. But I think the main point we take from Lucy's slide, just before we move into questions, is that, she's saying that one of the ways you select texts, and the tutors actually recommended this to her, is that you, how accessible are you finding that text that you're studying? And if it's just too hard, then give up on it, at least for the time being, quite likely altogether. Because again, we've got this, the key factor is there's so much information. That's the problem, really. Too much information, too little time. So you're always going to find something else. And especially the example she gives is move back from journal articles to a textbook for a while at least, until you've got that core basic understanding of the topic. You need that as a foundation to then start to entertain, if you like, the really more complex, fine, nuanced ideas that academics come up more with in the journal articles, as a kind of broad generalization. So please keep that in mind, that you shouldn't feel that in any way that you're failing somehow because you meet a text that just is too hard, really too difficult at that point. There's no shame at all in stepping back from that, going to something else that gets you understanding the topic much more easily. A lot of academics write journal articles in a very dense style that's not actually good writing for the reader, especially students. So anyway, let's pause, see if Tatiana has any questions coming in.
Yeah, we do have one question, so this is a cheeky one. How many references should I have for 2,000 word assignment? One of the favorites.
Yeah. I have to be cautious here, but at the same time, I know students, they always, every webinar we get asked this question, really. So I don't want to duck out of it altogether. So if you'll accept that I always have to make the proviso here that most importantly, it's about the quality of the references that you select and the quality of the ideas that you bring into your assignment from those particular sources, and the quality of how you evaluate or critically analyse the ideas you're bringing in. Those are the really key factors in terms of you know, whether your tutor's going to give you a high grade or not. So that sounds like I'm copping out. So to come back to your question, to some extent, I have heard tutors suggest that for a 2,000 word assignment, they'd be looking for at least 10 references. But please understand that's not a formula. It's just a tentative suggestion to try and give you a ballpark area. You know, if you're not going into double figures, even for something as relatively short as a 2,000 word assignment, you're limiting the amount of coverage that you're showing the tutor you have explored of the debate, you know, the mixture of views from different academics, different research sources that exist around most topics in academic assignments. You know, the thing about academic study in many subjects, perhaps apart from certain specific science topics, you know, the vast majority of other subjects, even the ones that still seem to deal with quite hard factual type stuff like accounting, for example, still very often tutors are looking for to see that you've read around a variety of views on that subject and understand that there's some kind of debate going on amongst academics. You know, that's what typifies the academic world, really, is that people arguing with each other and putting forward different points of view against each other's, you know, ideas from the research that they've conducted. All the time this research is going on, their main aim is to contribute something new, additional, you know, a further development, a qualification to the theory that's been developed before. So that automatically brings with it a somewhat of a different idea. And so you've got to show you understand that debate. That's what tutors are giving a lot of marks for in a lot of the subjects that you might be studying.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, Tatiana?
There is one more question. How, so I guess, how do I keep close to the topic without going too far off topic?
That's a really good question, I think. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really lies at the heart of what I'm hoping to convey to you tonight. And I wonder if we might park that question for a moment while we look through the next few slides, which is where I'm going to be, I hope, addressing that question of how do you stay on topic. The student is being, you know, that's a really perceptive question, because when I've conducted kind of polls and, you know, informal surveys with academics, tutors that I've worked with in large numbers at university where I worked, and asked them questions like, you know, what's the most common reason for students failing their assignments or getting low marks? And that's, you know, a lot of the questions I would ask would be, how do students get high marks? What are you looking for? But there's an equally important question there, isn't there? It's about why are students dropping down into the 40s or 40% or below? And absolutely commonly the tutors would say, because they did not answer the question that I set for them. And I set a very specific question quite deliberately, and they should have only researched the ideas that focused directly on that topic and written paragraphs around that. So if the student doesn't mind, I'm going to move through these slides, and let's see if, I hope you think that we may have addressed that in these. So the first point that I think does relate very directly to that question is that all the research on academic reading, you know, so from my kind of area of work, research into how do students, you know, study effectively, any kind of reading in the academic world, all the research shows that you need a purpose to your reading before you pick up the text. You cannot just, effectively anyway, pick up a text like a journal article and wait for it to somehow, you know, a light bulb to go on, and you think, oh, that's it, great, I've got that must be why I was reading this, because I've now realised something important. Actually, no, you have to be quite clear about what is it that you are looking for in that text, and if you do not find that or those things in that text, it's not of any worth to you for this assignment. So I'm focusing on assignment writing because I know that's what's critical for you at this stage of the academic year. So we've got an example of an assignment question, and your assignment question gives you your reading purpose, but you have to analyse it, as you might say, or consider it quite carefully, specifically to identify the key concepts that are in this question that will set the limits. So what the students just ask about is, how do I not go beyond the bounds of what I'm meant to be writing about, or the parameters, as it's sometimes called. And the key concepts in any question will set those boundaries for you, and you must not write anything anywhere in your assignment that is not somehow related to these key concepts. So in this case, you've got a two-part question, really. And I know Tatiana will probably be able to comment on this as well. Will definitely be able to comment on this because she's actually had to answer this question in her own studies. So I will pass back to her in a moment. But we can see there's two parts to the question, two different sentences, and they are addressing different things. The first part is saying that there's two types of technique that actually managers use to try and integrate people and acculturate new employees and early employees into the organisational culture. And those two systems are called socialisation and behaviour modification, two different approaches. And the question is asking, so uses the word utility, so that means the positives, the usefulness, the benefits of it. And there's a downside as well, isn't there, to these techniques? This is a very common approach in academic questions, is like weigh up the advantages and disadvantages of this one idea or these two ideas and compare and contrast them. So that seems kind of obvious, but you need to spend a few minutes really making sure that you get that you're only interested in socialisation and behaviour modification, and your reading purpose within that subject context is to find the advantages and disadvantages of them and probably compare those. That's maybe the majority of this question, and then there's a further aspect about what are the ethical implications of those kind of techniques, and again, the tutor sets you a concept here of transformational leadership, asking you to keep your discussion again within that. But the reading purpose is to discuss, are these ethical or not, and if so, why, or why not? Now, if you do that and you keep that in mind, that every paragraph of your essay, let's say 2,000 words has been mentioned, you might have 10 paragraphs in that essay. Every paragraph must directly go back to this question. The tutor must see that each paragraph, there are a number of points which keep adding something new about the positives and negatives of these two techniques, and later on perhaps how ethical they are or not. And that's it, and you don't write about anything else, however tempting or interesting it is. So you have to make judgments about that in what you're reading, but that's not, if you've got these concepts clearly in your mind and keep that question in front of you on a piece of paper, next to your computer, wherever you're, or wherever you're doing your reading. Do you want to say anything else about this question, Tatiana? Because I know it's familiar to you.
Yeah, this was actually part of my leadership for the transformational change module as a part of my MBA course. And actually, I love the topic, but one thing that I did find hard with this one was actually keeping within the parameters, because there was so much to read on, there was so much to explore, but you had to keep going back into it, as in keeping down to the key concepts. And then, as I said, I reached at one point, I think I was about 6,000 words. It was a 4,000 word essay, and I had to completely scale back because, and then again, what do you kind of discount? So I fully agree that it's find your key concepts, find exactly what you're reading, and then yes, go back to each individual section and reread it, and just make sure that every paragraph answers something within the question, whatever the tutor has actually has asked. So I have, fully agree with that. This was guys, you will very often find yourself as you're going through your academic studies that you have to actually don't be afraid, go and ask the tutor. If you're stuck, if you're unsure, go and ask them. Each and every one of them will help you out. Some more, some less, but you will get some form of direction. So please use your tutors to actually give you direction. But again, exactly what Martin says, and from personal experience, just stick to the basics, stick to what it says on a book. Don't go beyond that, because as I said, that alone will drop your marks. So just keep to the topic.
Yes, thanks, Tatiana. And again, I, as you'll hear, I mean, I can also say Tatiana would never admit this, but Tatiana is a highly successful student as well and is doing very, very well on her MBA, currently moving into doing her final project. And yet you're hearing each of these, you know, very successful students as they become, at least as they move through their program, they're all saying, ask for help, ask for guidance. So for any of you who currently are unsure about, you know, is that okay to do that? Am I somehow, does that mean I'm a kind of weaker student or something like that? I want you to get that idea out of your head straight away. And what they're all saying that we've been hearing from tonight, the other students as well on the videos and audio, is that a tutor sets a question like this for 100 or 200 students on the program, but actually if you go and take a further step of asking that tutor, they'll often give you further guidance and be more specific. You know, we heard from Lucy about, you know, how the tutor said, you know, the same tutor who set those 5 journal articles to all the students and said, you know, it's a kind of standard instruction, which is easy for them to do at the start of the academic year, put it in the course manual. But actually, if you go and ask them and they realise you're a well-intentioned, hard-working, intelligent student, that you need a bit more guidance, they'll usually respond and be quite helpful and come up with some other practical suggestions. So keep asking questions. Sometimes you won't get an answer, maybe you'll send an email and you might not get a response or something like that. But don't get put off, you know, that's human nature, isn't it? Law of averages kind of thing. So we've got our purpose and you've got to stick within those parameters. Now, I would say where you start for this, so let's start getting specific then. Okay, we've got all these masses of sources out there, as Tatiana's indicated, and she kept getting tempted to look further and further because some of it was really interesting stuff. But start off with the basics. Your tutor will have delivered maybe 1, perhaps 2 lectures on this particular topic. Probably won't be more of the course than that. The assignments zero in on a particular issue in the course syllabus usually. So concentrate on that. Your tutor's the one that's going to be marking this, or somebody else who works closely with them and is following their criteria. So go back to what they've judged to be the most important information to include in lectures on these issues: socialisation and behaviour modification, transformational leadership, and really study those quite carefully. I'd say that's worth spending time on reading at some length. You know, give yourself a good block of time until you feel sure that you're comfortable with the concepts and you get it. They'll maybe have had other things that they'll put into the course materials, you know, another handout somewhere on the virtual learning environment that you have access to, and then they'll have recommended a core textbook that you'll have, and there's probably a chapter, and I mean specifically a section of a chapter that covers these issues and maybe the relationship between them. And that's all you focus on from that textbook and from the tutor's whole set of course materials over the academic term. Don't look at anything else. But that's going to give you that basic understanding. And then you want to move beyond that. Now, we've said already from the lecturer's slides and the core textbook, you're going to have other references. They will both give citations to really important writers who are, you know, have sourced some of these ideas that they're summarising for you. Textbooks, that's a lot of where their writing comes from. They're summarising other researchers' work for you under particular topics, and in a way the tutor's doing something similar in their lectures as well. So you'll find some journal articles from that and perhaps other book chapters that they'll be using as their citations, but you can't only use those, because you may have to find some that are more up to date, because of course all of these ones will predate the textbook or journals or lecturers' materials, but especially the lecturer may well give you some quite up-to-date citations to journal articles. When you come to that journal article, you're faced with a mass of dense text in most of it. It's hard academic stuff, you know. As I mentioned, they're writing it for other academics, so don't expect them to make it easy and accessible. However, there are two sections where actually they have to summarise everything else that's really the key findings that are in the rest of the research, in the bulk of the article. They have to summarise that in the abstract really briefly, so they have to make it simple, and they also have to do that pretty much along those lines as well in the conclusion. So have a look at those two parts. So read the abstract. If you think it's of any possible interest, go to the conclusion, see if that adds anything more to what's in the abstract. If you are not feeling really strongly that from those two sections, this journal article is likely to have, sounds like it's really got some valuable stuff for your reading purpose only. If you're not if you haven't got that feeling, then throw that article away and move on to the next one. Really. Same with book chapters, have a summary at the end, usually an introduction that kind of covers the key points they're making, and again the summary at the end sort of pulls that together. Do the same with those, you know, just read the introduction, 2 or 3 paragraphs, then go to the summary. If it's not, you know, if it's not really hitting those targets of that reading purpose, if you're not seeing that kind of vocabulary leaping out at you, move on. Because you will waste time. You might find 1 or 2 bits and pieces, you know, that you could incorporate, but there'll be better stuff in other sources out there. You just keep searching, keep moving on. So that's kind of really about deselecting a lot of potential texts. But of course, some you will find have actually got something useful in it. You're pretty sure. So let's say you've got a book chapter to read through, and you know there's some obvious sections where it's referring to these kind of techniques or concepts that you're looking for in your assignment question. I'm emphasizing this first point here. Keep quickly reading in this first stage of scanning, as we call it, but when you're actually starting to seriously consider a text. Keep reading forwards, only looking for phrases. So you're scanning for those concepts that you know are central to your assignment purpose, because they connect directly with that. Now, one of the ways that any of us, when we're reading, lose lots of time and our reading speed slows down dramatically is because we go back, we stop, think, I didn't quite understand that, and you go back and you read it again, and then you put it together and with something else, you go back to the previous paragraph. You know, we're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You wouldn't believe how much this slows you down, and you don't need to do that on this first reading as it is of something that could be important. All you're doing is reading through and you just highlight those points that leap out at you and you don't stop on them. You move forward because you're selecting those by highlighting them for the 4th stage, we'll come on to a moment, where you go back and you only study those highlighted points, and they're the ones that you're going to consider very carefully and bring in some ideas into your assignment. This all sounds a bit radical, I realise. It sounds risky, because you might lose stuff that could have been important. But honestly, I'm basing this on 12 to 15 years experience of seeing how much students are unfocused in their reading, and it stresses them out and wastes so much time in the process. And you have to make it more ruthlessly efficient. And it works, you know, you can then achieve really high grades because what you're bringing in is high quality stuff.
Yeah, Martin, as I said, I think second that. As I said, I'm growing my management project as well. I'm looking at probably what a minimum 75 references that I will need to, you know, the journals, articles, books that I will need to reference. We do have a question actually, and I think you're going actually through the answer. I'm an international student and sometimes struggle with understanding, and reading then takes long time. How do I make it shorter? And it is exactly what you've just been talking to. Whatever you find, whether it's an article, a journal, a book, whatever it is, I think always look at the first part of the book or article and read the synopsis. What is it all about? Read the back page. What does that tell you anything? And be brave in if it's not, just discount it. Always keep in mind what your main topic is and stick to that specific topic. If it doesn't mention it, find another one. There is thousands, millions of books out there. Just keep to the basics.
Yeah, absolutely, Tatiana, and thanks again to that student for the question. I know there'll be plenty of other international students listening to this perhaps who really identify with what they're saying, and you know, a lot of my work has been with international students with English as a second language who worry that you know, creates so much more of a disadvantage. All of the principles we're discussing tonight are the answers to this question, really, which is that you have to dismiss a lot of what you might otherwise think you have to read and only look for these issues that are absolutely directly related to the target purpose that you have for your reading, and that's the only answer, really. And then, because at some point you have to study some ideas really carefully and spend a lot of time on those. So, you know, you can never get away from that. To produce a good quality assignment, it needs good quality research that's been, you know, which you really understand, and the tutor will read from your writing that you get this and you've thought about the complex implications of this. So you've got to study some things really carefully. So it means that you've got to eliminate lots of other things first, so that you've got the time to spend on this final stage of the reading. And we'll move on to that now. Actually, let's listen to what Farah, what the student you met earlier, has to say about this.
One thing that I found difficult was the academic reading, especially when you've got tutorial work to do, and then on top you have like chapters to read. It's how you read, so it's not about reading word by word, it's skim reading and picking up the key points. Or maybe if you've got a lot of chapters to read, share it between a group of people. So you read one chapter, you feed it back to the team, and they read the other chapters and they feed it back to you. So it's kind of extracting the key points rather than actually reading word by word when you have reading to do.
Yeah, so at some point then you are going to reach the points which you have to read in depth for understanding. But as Farah was indicating, you know, you don't read anything first time round trying to understand it all. And this is what will be slowing, you know, some of you down a great deal, is that you want to understand everything you read, even if it's just so that you don't then use it. You have to move past that. It's a really natural inclination to want to do that. That's what we do with some of our other reading types. But you have to be much more selective, as she's saying, than that. But then you will have highlighted these points, certain things that you know are important, and you'll go back and you'll look for some much deeper understanding. And the two kind of questions really that you kind of have in your mind as you're studying then in depth at last, something that's going to be of value in your assignment, is, you know, you're really trying to understand, aren't you? What did the authors, what were the authors really trying to convey to me as a reader when they wrote this up from their own research? So they're arguing that they found something out in their research that's important. You know, what is that? Even more importantly, though, how do those findings say something about that reading purpose that you set for yourself at the beginning in your assignment question? Exactly, for, you know, the example we looked at, exactly how is this research somehow showing that behaviour modification has more disadvantages to it than socialisation? You know, exactly what is it that they're saying about that? And you have to get that really clear in your mind. So that's where the time comes in. So you only want to be reading points that I've really got, it's what I call the nuggets of gold. You know, all of this process, you could liken it to like prospecting for gold. And you have to throw away a lot of mud and dirt and earth and rock that's useless to you, because you're just looking for those few nuggets of gold. It's a good metaphor for what we're speaking about, really. And when you found those, you know, those real nuggets of gold, what I suggest you do for your assignments then, and this is another radical idea, but I'm really saying this so you save time, and it's not going to be risky for you to do this, is write those ideas from what you're reading directly into an essay draft, so a template draft essay on your computer. And what you're doing is summarizing what you have understood from the text. So you have to write, don't write with the text there open and sort of obviously don't copy and paste it across anyway. You want to absorb the idea into your mind and get it, and then write it into your computer. It's only a draft. You can change it around as much as you want to later, and write it down into a section of this, you know, emerging draft essay in your own language. So I'm sure you understand you have to paraphrase that. We're going to look at both of these processes later, in the next sessions over the next 2 weeks, summarising and paraphrasing. But one of the reasons I say this is, sounds a strange idea at first when you meet it, is that I will always argue that, as many others do, that you will keep making more and more sense of the topic as you write about it. So you're going to keep bringing in new ideas or different ideas on that same topic from a range of different authors, and you've got to integrate those, synthesize them together, you know, weigh them up, see which is arguing for one thing or arguing against another thing. And as you build that argument, then you'll come to understand it better and better. So don't shy away, don't postpone writing from what you're reading. Once you've found something that's good, take it straight in while you understand it. From your core reading, you remember the lecturer's materials and the core textbook chapter, you'll have a fair understanding of what are probably the main subheadings of your essay. Just put those in to create a bit of a structure, outline structure at the very beginning, and then you can take in these draft ideas into what you see is probably the right section, but you can always move them into another section later anyway as you carry on doing your editing. We'll talk a lot more about those ideas next week. Yeah, so just 1 or 2 points about further support. I now run my own business, ELS International, based on the work that I've done at university over the last 15 years or so. And one of the main things I provide are assignment reviews on this kind of draft writing that we've just been discussing. So if you're interested in that service, then you can contact me. Unite students get a discount on that, and you can just contact me without any obligation, or send me a draft and I'll give you an idea of what would be involved in that. But we'll give you very, very detailed feedback then on how you can improve it before your final submission deadline. I'll just let you listen to Leo, who was one of the users.
They were very supportive, and they allowed me to submit my assignments to them for a critical review before I actually submitted them properly. And I remember one of my assignments, I'd submitted it to them on the Thursday, and it was supposed to be in on the Monday, and they'd returned it to me, and it was really, really bad. So I had to rewrite it over the weekend, which I did, and I'm glad to say I managed to get an A.
Something else I mentioned much earlier is there are some study guides on the website as well, which you can access. Again, we offer Unite students a discount on that. There's my textbook, which goes through a lot of these skills. There's 2 chapters on finding sources for your research and then how to read them effectively in a lot more detail than we covered tonight. And the publishers are happy to offer a discount on the textbook as well. So particularly if you're studying in those kind of areas, that might be useful. You just need to use this code that they've mentioned there. But you'll find all that information on the website as well. So have a look at that sometime if that's of interest. And Tatiana mentioned at the beginning that this is the first in a new series of the webinars. We're repeating this session again tomorrow, so if you found it useful and you want to recommend it to any of your friends, please do so, of course. And then we'll move into the writing, looking in depth at how you create assignments that have got what tutors are looking for to award high grades. So the basics of academic writing for that next week, and then some further development about critical analysis specifically in the following week, and then a final session on exams, depending on when we find out when you may be doing your exams, but it's likely to run in that week as well. Okay, thank you very much for your concentration tonight. I think most of the students have stayed with us right through, haven't they, Tatiana, from what I've seen, so that's great. Yes. Thank you for staying. It's been rather a long session, I know, and a lot to throw at you, but I do hope it's been useful and just enables you to, manage your reading in a way that you find less stressful and you just feel more in control of it. That's really what I want you to take from tonight. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and thanks, Tatiana, for all your input as well.
Absolute pleasure, everybody. Thank you very much. As Martin mentioned, we are repeating this session tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and please do join us over the next 3 weeks. So next either Tuesday or Wednesday, and then another couple of weeks after that. I've done these webinars with Martin, and they are really, really useful. Please don't be shy. If you have any other questions or anything else, don't forget that you can also publish these in the questions box. I will read them out to Martin, and we'll do our best to support you guys. It's been an unprecedented year, I think, for everybody. It's difficult being a student and doing a lot of this work remotely, and that's the reason why these kind of webinars are really, really important. So thank you again for joining us, and I'm looking forward to, both Martin and I are looking forward to seeing you again next week. Have a good one. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.